Private pilot training tends to focus heavily on the fundamentals. Cross countries might be planned by hand with pen and paper, and pilotage and dead reckoning are emphasized. There are good reasons for that. Some of these are foundational skills that every pilot should have, even though post-training flights are likely to be planned on the iPad and flown GPS direct with moving maps. Having those manual skills in combination with technology is more powerful than having just one or the other alone. That's true even if technology is perfectly reliable. It's not, of course, and the manual skills may come in handy as a backup one day. But on the other hand, training sometimes bears little resemblance to how things are done in the real world, and training on the technology itself is often shortchanged. That might mean you're misusing, misunderstanding, or overlooking certain features. You might not be getting the most out of the modern resources that are available, whether it's your iPad, GPS, or autopilot, for example. Today's flight departs Washington Island on the Door County Peninsula in Wisconsin. We'll use a combination of new and old-school techniques to plan a departure route that ensures we remain within gliding distance of land as we cross the bay. Then after about 260 miles of cruise, we'll end up dealing with the Minneapolis-St. Paul Class B airspace on our way into the South St. Paul Airport. This is a small, non-towered airport immediately below a low Bravo shelf and wedged between the surface airspace for two busier airports, St. Paul Downtown and Minneapolis-St. Paul International. On the way, we'll discuss some GPS tips and tricks you might be missing. After taking off from one of the grass runways at Washington Island, we immediately have a water crossing to consider. Whether it's okay to cross open water in a single-engine airplane is an endless debate with many considerations, but in this case, there's no reason to expose ourselves to open water for this short stretch. We can adjust the route a little to the south to cross near Ephraim and over Chambers Island. The question is how high we need to be to remain in gliding distance of land at all times. It's about 12 miles across the bay at this point, 5 miles to Chambers Island and its private runway, and another 7 to the opposite shore. That means the farthest we'd ever be from land is about 3.5 miles. To glide 3.5 miles, according to the 172 POH, we need around 2,500 feet of altitude. Crossing at 2,500 AGL probably wouldn't guarantee we'd make the shore, though, for a few reasons. First, 3.5 miles behind us isn't the same as 3.5 miles in front because of the altitude lost in the turn. Even going straight ahead, we'd likely want some room to maneuver for a landing. Second, we'd need perfect response and technique, and we'd need to fly the correct best glide speed, which actually varies with weight and wind. And maybe most importantly, the winds aloft can dramatically alter the glide range. We might go much further downwind, but then we'd probably need room to maneuver to land into the wind. A couple of those things work against us today. The westerly winds aloft reduce the glide straight ahead, and the altitude lost in the turn back erases any benefit gained from the tailwind in the other direction. For planning, let's be conservative. A 172 has a glide ratio of around 9 to 1, but I only count on about 6 to 1 to give room for those factors. That also keeps the mental math simple. 6 to 1 is 1 nautical mile per 1,000 feet AGL. So at 4,000 AGL, we could pretty comfortably reach dry land at any point, and at a westbound cruising altitude of 6,500 MSL, we should have a good chance of making a runway. Today we're going to go all the way up to 8,500 for a smooth ride. There's technology that can help us out in real time here. ForeFlight's Glide Advisor calculates glide range while accounting for wind, terrain, and altitude lost in the turn, and puts a continuously updated ring around the aircraft marking that range. It's accurate to the extent that the winds aloft predictions are correct, and as long as the aircraft is set up correctly in ForeFlight. So let's turn on the Glide Advisor for this flight. We can do that from the settings on the map page and scroll down to enable Glide Advisor. In general, I like to have the Glide Advisor on all the time so that it's immediately accessible in an emergency. I can see it at a glance, and it's one less thing I have to do while I'm busy with the emergency. So here we can see glide settings of 68 knots for best glide speed and an 8 to 1 glide ratio for this airplane. 9 to 1 is probably more correct, but 8 to 1 gives me a little bit more conservative glide ring. This is set with the aircraft performance profile, so on the flight plan I can tap on the aircraft and then choose Edit and scroll down to glide performance, and we can see 68 knots and an 8 to 1 glide ratio is set. The accuracy of the Glide Advisor's calculations depend on this being set correctly. So we'll plan on a cruising altitude of 8,500, and we'll be well above 4,000 AGL, or around 5,000 MSL in this area, before we even turn to cross the water. We'll use the Glide Advisor to monitor and maintain our engine out options the whole way. The Minneapolis Class Bravo is a pretty standard upside-down wedding cake configuration. It's possible we'd get a Bravo clearance on the way in, but I'm not going to count on it. It's often best to make a plan to avoid the airspace, and then just be pleasantly surprised if you get a clearance. But mainly here, I don't expect a clearance because it's not really necessary. We can comfortably stay below. On the way in, we'll have 4 shelves to avoid, with bases at 6,000, 4,000, 3,000, and 2,300. Many Bravos have flyway charts available, which make the airspace clearer and suggest routes to avoid it. Minneapolis doesn't have a flyway chart, so we're using the TAC chart. But I can make the shelves that matter clearer using the annotation tool in ForeFlight. So we enable annotation here, and I want to choose a color and thickness that stands out on the map. And I'm fine with this magenta color in 8-point thickness. So I'm just going to highlight the shelves that matter to me here. So I'll draw a line here with a 60 above it, because that's where the 6,000 foot shelf starts. Then another one there, which is where the 4,000 foot shelf starts. Then right here with 3,000. And right before the airport, 2,300. There's some other airspace here that I care about too. Just north of the South St. Paul Airport is St. Paul Downtown's Class Delta airspace. And just a couple miles west of the airport is the surface area for the Minneapolis Bravo. So we'll have to be sure to keep our patterns tight here at South St. Paul, especially on the north and west sides of the airport. We're going to cruise at 8,500 for a smooth ride today. We could make it easy and just descend all the way to an altitude below 2,300, the base of the lowest shelf, before even reaching the Bravo. Then we don't need to worry about it. But doing that leaves us down low longer, where we need to consider obstacles and engine out options, and where we're more likely to experience convective or mechanical turbulence. I'd like to stay up high as long as possible. What we're going to do is use the VNAV capability of the Garmin GTN 750 along with user waypoints to help us descend in the most efficient way possible here. Along the way, we'll explore some of the most useful features of modern GPS navigators that often get overlooked by private pilots. We're using the GTN 750, but most of these functions are accessible on any modern GPS.